Hello. Okay, so the answer to your question is yes, we can send OSC commands to set fader levels, but it's a little bit complex, so let me go through and see if I can explain what's going on. First of all, if you look at my faders here, they look a little bit different, and I have a tutorial about the different things you can do with faders, but basically what I've done is asked the faders here to show me fader levels when I'm running light cues. The way you do that, I'm in edit mode right now. I'm going to double click this fader. And this fader is controlling levels, so it's going right to these lights directly and controlling them. It's not running a function. It's going right to the lights and controlling the channels. What you do is you put a check mark in this box that says monitor the selected channels and update the slider level. What that will do then is if I'm running a cue, and let's go into run mode for a second. So it'll actually show me what the fader levels are as I'm going through my different scenes. And the same thing would happen over here if I'm running lighting cues. It would actually show me what my fader levels are. When you click that checkbox, show me the fader levels, you'll see this X appear, and this is the reason for that. So I'm showing the fader levels for this song A4. If I reach up here and grab the fader, I've now manually overridden the levels that are going out from the cue. I'm manually overriding them, and then this red X comes on to show me that I am now manually overriding the fader levels. So anytime I move that fader, it's going to override those levels and change them. In order to have it go back to the original fader level, I have to deselect the manual override by clicking on these X's. So again, if I move this, it automatically overrides the level, and to have it go back to the original level, I'd have to click on the X here. So that's basically showing me what's going on. Okay, now let's take a look. I can send commands to control fader levels. So what I've done is I've gone in my profile here for OSC commands in my input mapping, and I've created two fader levels in here, fader 1 and fader 2. And watch my tutorial on how to create the profiles and everything. I'll include a link for that, but just assuming you know what you're doing there. And when you create these, the way I showed you, you may have to double click here and just change this from a button to a slider. It really doesn't matter. It'll work either way. But when you use the wizard to detect these signals coming from Multiplay, it'll probably assign them as being a button. You can just double click here and change it from a button to a slider, and then it'll work just fine. But anyway, I have my fader 1 and my fader 2, and I've added some more buttons in here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 different buttons. So my profile is all set up. So now I'm going to assign those profile fader 1 and fader 2 to the actual faders themselves. And it's fairly easy to do that. Go to fader 1, double click, and when it comes up here on the first page, it will say external input, and I simply go to choose OSC commands, and I find my fader 1 and say OK. So now the external input is going to control at fader 1 level for you. And then I'll do the same thing for fader number 2 over here. Double click it, external input, choose OSC commands, and I'll choose fader 2 and say OK. So now my OSC commands are going to be controlling fader 1 and fader 2. Let's look at my commands. So I put in a command here, an OSC command, to send fader 1 a DMX level of 200. So let me click on the cue. Let's look at that. So there's what I called it. And by the way, what I did here is I gave it a cue number that's way far away from my regular cues, cue number 200. And I also said, as far as cue advance goes, I want no action and I have no target for this cue. And I'm going to network messages and look at the format here. So it matches the profile /page 1 /fader /1. So that's my locator. And then space, comma F, space 200. That means that's going to set the DMX level of that fader at 200. So DMX runs from 0 to 255. So 0, the fader would be off. 255, the fader would be all the way up. So 200's about like 4/5 of the way up. And that would be my command that I put in there. So if I get in run mode here and I fire this command, it will set fader 1 at a DMX level of 200. So hopefully that makes sense. Then I did a similar thing here for fader number 2. I'll double click on this. Fader 2 at 50. Here's my message /page1/fader/2. So that's the locator for fader 2. Space, comma F, space 50. So this is going to set fader 2 at a DMX level of 50 when I send this command. So let's try that. I'll go back in the run mode and say go, and it sets fader level 2. Now, the reason that I did these commands 200, 201, and 202, and I don't have any actions, it doesn't go anywhere, and it doesn't fire any kind of a target, that is so I could connect my hot buttons. Because if I'm running cues from here and I want to hit a hot button, I don't want to jump out of the cue list. I want to be able to just use my hot buttons and have those hot buttons send a command to the faders without jumping out of the cue list. So that's why I did this. So I could actually be up here like on start. But for instance, I'll right click on this hot button and say properties, and you can see it's my main cue list. It's target number, cue number 200 is my target, and I just gave it a title there, okay? So when I press this hot button, it's basically going to fire this cue, which is telling fader number 1 to go to 200. And we can see that that works. When I click it, fader number 1 goes to 200. This hot button here is attached to this cue. So it will fire this cue, cue number 201, which sets fader number 2 at 50. So now here's the issue with this. If I'm running something from the cue list, like say, let's say song 4 here, I'll just click this to get song 4 up. You can see my fader levels. When I fire this hot button, it overrides the fader level for this, but the other faders are still on. So it doesn't cancel anything out. It doesn't cancel any of the scenes on. I'm still in this particular scene. I've just overridden the fader level. So if you're looking for a hot button that's going to turn all the faders off and institute a new fader level, what you actually need to do then is create a scene. And then just put the scene somewhere down here and give it a cue number like that it's advanced and say don't go anywhere, and it'll bring that scene into play. Hopefully that makes sense. So same thing here. If I fire hot button there, it adjusts this fader level, but again, notice it didn't move anything here. It's like doing a manual override. It's not canceling out these other faders. So I don't know exactly what you're trying to accomplish. If you just want like a temporary override of a fader, you can do that. Now the problem is these are overriding now, and I have to cancel them out to go back to the original fader levels. You can use an OSC command to do that. Let me just show you that. So if I go into this fader here, like normally I would have to click on the X's to cancel out the manual override. You can do that by sending an OSC command too. What I did is I created a button 6. So look here, page 1, buttons, /6, space, comma, F, space 1. So that's going to be my button 6 command. Then I went to my fader over here, level, go down here where it says override reset control, and I chose that button 6. So I go in here and I go to button 6 and choose that. So it's going to receive that command to override that. And then I used the same command for fader number 2 over here. I went into the editing here, over here where it says override reset control, and I chose, and then I'm just going to choose button 6 as my override command, and then OK. So now when I'm running this, if I fire this and fader 1 goes, fader 2 goes, now I'm going to send my override command, which will reset those 2 faders back to normal. So I mean, you could do it that way. You could be in a song or running a cue, and, you know, fire that fader and fire this fader, and then use your override command and then go back to the original cues. And just to show you again why I do that, let's say we're actually using multiplay and we're going through the cue list. So button 3 fires that particular scene. Button 4 fires that particular scene. And let's say I'm in here and now I press this button here and I change my fader 1 level, change my fader 2. Notice that this did not move. My hot buttons did not make this go anywhere in the cue list because these commands aren't assigned to go anywhere. There's no action. So the command just gets fired, but it doesn't advance or go anywhere in the cue list. But again, like let's say if we say button 5 here, it fires this cue, but see these 2 faders are still being manually overridden. So you're not getting the proper levels for them. So you have to reset them. Same thing would be true if I was running the cue list here. I'll just start that and I'll use my next cue command up here and start going through the cue list. Now I would have multiple next cue commands. Okay, so we're in this particular cue right now, but again, fader level, I bop that up, fader 2 goes up, okay? And now they're overriding what the fader levels are. I'd have to reset those faders then to fix that. Otherwise we have them coming in and it's not canceling out this scene, that scene's staying in. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If you want to use the hot buttons to cancel out the other faders and just bring one particular fader up or a couple faders up, then you need to create a scene for that. If you just want to temporarily raise 1 or 2 faders, that's fine. Remember, it's not going to cancel out the scene, but then you have to reset those faders because otherwise they're going to stay on as if they were in manual mode.